We've got a brand new tuner update in NHL 24. Let's take a look at it. All right, so it was announced that on April 25th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll receive a new gameplay tuner update. So let's go through the notes here. The developer feedback was, we are improving light work and extra padding X factors to encourage their use when using smaller goaltenders. So in an attempt to make smaller goaltenders a little more viable, especially in Hockey Ultimate Team, they've increased extra padding and light work zone ability, the buff for small goaltenders, by 40%. Now that's a massive increase because you have to remember, back in a prior tuner, they actually buffed both of these abilities earlier on in the year. Now, I'll be honest with you, kind of frustrating. They don't label what a small goaltender is. I'm going to assume it's anyone under 6 foot, but I'll have an answer for you once I hear back from EA. I hate when they use the vague wording when it comes to stuff, but this is, stuff that we need to know. They also increased extra padding and light work superstar ability buff for small goaltenders by 15%. Light work has already, in my opinion, been one of the better goaltender abilities, but I still don't know if it'll matter because while I can appreciate they're making changes, right now is the time to mess around with all of this stuff, I will say. Simply because the people that are remaining are the hardcore players, the ones that play the game a ton throughout the year. So if it improves NHL 25 by getting some actual game feedback, I'm okay with it. I don't think that we're going to see an increase or change anything in here because when we have 99 shooters and you have someone under 6 foot, it's simply a matter of goaltenders that are 6'4" and above won't be able to actually make saves based on their attributes, but it just hits them. It's always been an issue, and it still remains the issue using smaller goaltenders. Next up, we are balancing how much stamina damage is delivered from big hits and boosting Truculence and Shrug It Off to create more incentives to equip these X Factors. This one's kind of wild. So, they reduced non-Truculence hits to deliver a max of 35 stamina damage on the biggest hits. I believe this was at 50% prior to this, so this means that you hold down on the right stick, you charge up a hit, and then you deliver one at speed, the biggest hits that are in this game. And what it would do is it would wipe out a lot of the stamina of that player. So now, non-Truculence hits are only going to be up to 35 as opposed to 50. They increased Truculence zone ability to deliver 75% extra stamina damage on the biggest hit. In my opinion, Truculence has been a great ability this year. And again, a lot of the reason why Truculence is so good is not for the big hits because most of them end up being a penalty, but it's more for the shove check. So when you are chasing someone around the zone, if you have someone with Truculence, you can just hit up on the right stick and it will cause a stumble animation. Now, there isn't as much of that this year because a lot of players that use total controls are only using circle or B to actually hit because that's the hit button. So they don't actually shove check at all, which is a theory of mine as to why Unstoppable Force has felt so underwhelming lately. Now, again, when it comes to gameplay and stuff like this, I'm not going to give my feedback on what I'd rather see. I'm just going to point out my experience in the game. When you use someone, let's say Connor McDavid, and I'll give a shout out to my co-host of my podcast, Coffee and Shell, Padre, he has talked about this all year, that when you're skating down the boards, and this might be at the higher end, but when you're skating down the boards and you get hit, even just clipped with someone with Truculence, it wipes out almost all of their stamina bar, and the issue with that is because stamina is so important in NHL 24 with the big change to the fatigue system and all of that, it basically eliminates that player from being useful on that shift. Now, I don't know what the Truculence zone ability damage, stamina damage was prior to this, but I would hazard a guess if you hit a guy and you have Truculence activated, it is going to effectively just wipe out that player from being useful for the rest of its shift. And what'll end up happening is if you have a ton of Truculence players, you're going to see full lineups of Truculence. I am going to try it myself. They've really dialed back the amount of players that actually have Truculence in HUT recently. However, I'm not even talking about just on defensemen, because I think forwards with Truculence was a little less impactful, because again, it's not so much about the big hits, it's about getting the stumble animations, and usually in your own zone, you're running around, and it's your defensemen that are the ones in tight having to knock people off. But a full lineup of Truculence players, if you get a hit, you're just wiping out your opponent's, players. And when you get someone who's stuck out there, and they just hop over the boards, they get hit, and they can't change lines, that's basically the full pressure meter at all times. So they also increased the Superstar ability to deliver 35 extra stamina damage on biggest hits. So again, half Superstar ability is half the zone ability. And they also increased the Shrug It Off zone ability. It'll reduce incoming stamina damage from hits by 75%. This is big, and this is kind of what I thought Shrug It Off would be when it first came into the game. I don't know if it was new this year, but it's definitely become prevalent this year. And it hasn't really been noticeable so far, but you're going to have to run players with Shrug It Off to have any chance of surviving against these full Truculence lineups. You're going to see it a lot. Everyone that has a player with Truculence is going to play high in the lineups now. Again, I'm going to try it out and see what it's like. They increased the Shrug It Off Superstar ability, which will reduce incoming stamina damage by 30%. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays up. Obviously, at this stage at 99 everything, Shrug It Off kind of becomes a necessity on almost any forward. Like almost any player, these two abilities now become the most sought after. Like Truculence, in my opinion, now trumps Shutdown in terms of a defensive ability. If you can get a hit, and there's a lot of hitting in NHL 24, it's kind of the arcadey style that they seem to be going for in NHL 24, you can get tons of hit. And if that means that you've effectively not only hit that player, knocked them out of possession of the puck, but now they can't even contribute, it's just going to be interesting to see how much that impacts the game. And like I said, they should be doing this kind of stuff at this stage of the game because, you know, if we don't like it, maybe they patch it back, but at least if we don't like it, they now know going into 25, and it might be a good thing. Again, I can't just say this is going to be an awful thing because we haven't played it yet, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think of these changes. I put out a tweet yesterday when this dropped that it definitely feels like they are trying to make the game more arcadey, but this isn't really from the producer, like the, you know, the overarching people in control of the game. This is the gameplay team trying some new thing. And I've always said that NHL is going to be the one sports game where you're never going to get, literally ever going to get players to agree that gameplay is great, because you are either someone who enjoys arcadey, big hits, big deeks, you know, insane speed, all of that, or you're someone who likes sim-based gameplay where it's a little bit slower, time and space is harder to create, somewhat more mimics the real thing. You're never going to get the entire player base to agree on that. So it definitely feels like with the pressure system and the fatigue system, it's kind of arcadey things, especially with the hitting the way it was, where it's just like anyone can hit. Like Makar is so much more impactful this year than prior years because he's so fast and he can truck over anyone. So let me know what you think in the comments section down below of this change, and if you were someone who anticipates if you're going to like it or hate it, and then we'll come back in about a week and I'll give my thoughts on it. But I would love to hear from you in the comments or on Twitch as we test out the new Truculence update in NHL 24. Thank you guys again for watching. I'll see you next time.